Kindness, Tome Foes. It's a book, it just came out. This is going to be a very intelligent and well-thought review of the book. The cover is very cool. As you can see, it has...
It's like Doctor Strange, but he's bald.
As you can see, we have Dr. Phil on the front of it. This is just the special edition cover. The other cover is also very cool. It has... it's got some crazy stuff all over the front of it. He definitely reminds me of Doctor Strange. My local game store, GameCore, pre-ordered these for me for free, which was pretty cool. So, awesome. I really appreciate that. I really like the special edition covers. I think they're really, really neat. They look really nice. The only problem I have with it, because this is a review, damn it, because there has to be some pros and cons, okay? The book's perfect, okay? First time I looked into the book, I was like... However, the only thing I don't like about these special edition covers is the material they use on the front. You gotta be really careful, because I held it for more than 20 minutes at a time while I was reading it, and my hands got a little clammy, and it made my thumbprints on it, which kinda sucks. But it's still really cool. I have my Volos one still. If you check out the Volos one, there's a bunch of crap all over this because a lot of things stick to it. Anyways, let's get into the closer part to the inside of this book. So, there's the intro part. Every other book reviewer on YouTube for this book always likes to read the little thing. The little disclaimer. I actually have not read it yet. Fine. The disclaimer reads, we asked Mordenkainen to write a humorous disclaimer for this book, and we got this response. The day I start writing frivolous disclaimers for game manuals, particularly one riddled with text stolen from my notes, is the day I retire from wizardry and abandon all self-respect. I like this disclaimer. Okay, so here are the contents. The contents of the book. There's the Blood War, which is chapter 1, which goes over a lot of demons. There's the Elves, which is chapter 2. Chapter 3 is Dwarves and Duragar. Chapter 4 is the Gith and their endless war. Chapter 5 is Halflings and Gnomes. And Chapter 6 is the huge-ass Beastiary that comes in this one. Now, if we're going to compare this one to Volo's Guide, there's hella more monsters in here, I think. It feels like there is. The book is definitely a lot bigger, and it has more pages. In comparison to Volo's Guide had more races. This doesn't have as many playable races in it. It's got more monsters. So, in my opinion, it's much more for Dungeon Masters. If you're a player, I strongly suggest you don't buy this book unless you're really, really, really into the D&D lore and you just want to read about it. However, that can be kind of lame because then you know all the spoilers, and if a DM ever wants to surprise you with any monsters from Mordenkainen's, then, I mean, you're just going to know everything. That's kind of lame. But you can do whatever you want. You can buy the book, read the whole thing, and go to your D&D games and be like, yeah, I know everything. Suck it. Now, it talks about, oh my god, there's a lot in this book to read. First off, the preface. This is the preface page, and it's just Mordenkainen being in character, and that's fun. I thought it was cool in Volo's Guide that it was like Volo's telling you how to learn monsters, and I think that's interesting. I think that's kind of fun. It gives a little bit of flavor when you're reading it, and it can give you some inspiration if you're gonna world build. If you're gonna world build some stuff like a Blood War into your world, then you can just do that, and that's pretty cool. So, chapter 1 is about the Blood War. I skimmed it. I didn't read the whole damn book in a day. I'm not smart, okay? And if you ever really want to know more about Devils and Demons, or you want to have a campaign centered around Devils and Demons, I highly suggest getting this book and reading about it because it goes into some crazy stuff that you can add to your campaign. Like the Lords of the Nine and the Yugoloths. I never liked Yugoloths, but they go into more detail into the book here, and I think that's cool. It gives more, history to them, and maybe you'll actually enjoy running them. It goes in between all of the rulers of the 9 Hells, which is awesome. The 9 Hells are really interesting, and they go into detail about them in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it's really, really awesome that there's even more detail here, which is, it's cool if you want to know more about it. Mostly the first part of this book, it's lore. And in Volo's Guide to Monsters, there was lore for monsters, and it was cool because it was like beholders, what they do, all that stuff, and giants. This is more like the history of the plains, and it's cool if you like it, but if you're like me and you're like, I'm really only going to read this for inspiration and not actually use it in my campaign, it's okay. There's some really cool art in here, like this, torture. I also like to call this book Nightmare Fuel, because this book is full of nightmare fuel. Everything they were like, you know what, we're gonna make a new book, okay? The last book, Volo's guy, not that great. Okay, Xanathar's guy, yeah, it was pretty good. They're all okay. But you know what didn't have enough of? Didn't have enough of giving our children nightmares. So maybe we'll add more into this next book. And they did. There's some pretty cool stuff if you want some cults in your game. Really, this just has to do more with if you're gonna run a game that's centered around demons and devils. There's also new things for cambions. Cambions are interesting. I always find them to be really fun, and I kind of hoped that they could be like a player race, because it's kind of cool. But I mean, there's tieflings, that makes sense. But speaking of tieflings, there are lots of new tiefling sub-races that were in Unearthed Arcana, and I think they changed? I don't know if they changed. But there's some cool art and some cool little tables you can roll on in this book for tieflings if you're really into that. Lots of devil customization tables as well. You can, just like in Volvo's guide, there was like, you can make a custom beholder. In this one, you can like make a custom devil, which is cool. They do the same thing for demons, I'm pretty sure. And then there's demonic boons, in case you want somebody to be of demon descent, because there's not really cults for demons. They're more just like, I'm gonna show up and kill everybody, and that's like just how they work. It's pretty interesting. And then there's demon customization tables with some pretty cool pictures as well, right? Some of the demon customization tables, there's like unusual demon features, and these are pretty fun. There's one where like you give them an extra arm, or they have huge feet, or they have teeny tiny wings, or they have no eyes, or they just bleed wasps. Yeah, like I said, this book is very nightmare fuel. And then they go into the elves. The elves are interesting because we need more elf lore. Really, really having to do with more world building. If you want to really flesh out the elves in your world, you can do this with this book. There are some cool stuff about the Feywild, which is really neat. There's some neat pictures right here, which is pretty cool. I like elven architecture. I think it's really interesting for D&D, and they don't do enough of it. They also go into the Eladrin, which I'm going to go into later, which are now, I guess, a playable race. We'll go into that in a minute. They also go to the Drow, thank God. I actually really like that they went into the Drow. I think the Drow are really cool. And there were a bunch of supplement books for them in the past, and I feel like nobody knows what the Drow are about. They're just dark elves. No, they're not just dark elves. They have their whole society with wolf and spiders and all that, and it's really, really cool. The Dark Elves. They also go over the Raven Queen, the Shadarkai, which is really cool. Everybody knows the Raven Queen, but nobody knows about the Shadarkai, which are like her minions basically, and they're really, really awesome. And they live in her fortress and they follow her around and they do what she wants. And they're kind of like elves. But anyways, there's some elf sub-races. So there are sub-races in Mordenkainen's for players if you want that. Like the Eladrin, which I know for a fact 1 million people are going to want to play, because their ability is very, very cool. They have the ability to change their season. They basically are followed along a season, and if you want to have these in your game, you can, and they're pretty neat. So there's like an Eladrin of Autumn, there's an Eladrin of Winter, Spring, and Summer, and they can change every long rest, I believe is what it is. And you get special abilities when you change, and you also, your personality and your flaw trait change as well. So it's like you're constantly changing like the seasons, which I guess is pretty cool. There's also elf tables, like elven trinkets, not elf adventure story hooks. I like this. I wish they would have added more story hooks into other player races and stuff like that, but I guess they go into that a little bit further, which we'll get into. There's also Drow adventurer story hooks, which are very, very good. I feel like if you're going to play a Drow, guess what? You can't play Dritzt. Yes, Dritzt is a good Drow, but 99% of Drow are not good, and you are not R.A. Salvatore. So if you're going to play a Drow, I very much suggest that you look at these Drow adventure story hooks. They're very cool. One of them, for example, is you were the lover of a high-ranking priestess of Lolth, and as means of enhancing your status, when she was tired of you, the loss of your status was humiliating, so you left. Another one is all your life you were alienated and terrified by the cruelty of your kin. The first chance you got, you volunteered to go to a surface raid, then deserted the group and remained behind. And now you're hated and feared wherever you go, but at least you've found a small group of adventurous friends who trust and support each other. Dwarves and Duergar are also in the book. You can go into more details if you want to have some dwarf stuff. It goes into dwarven lore, which is really cool if you want to learn more about dwarves. I think dwarves are awesome, and I think they're underplayed, and I think they're really, really cool. There's also the deities, their religions. I'm glad they go into Durgar. Durgar are cool, and I think going more into their lore is really interesting. Like I said, we're about maybe not even halfway through this book. There's a lot of stuff to read in it, so if you really want to read all about D&D lore, well, get this book. There's also dwarf tables, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of dwarf tables. Your allies, your purpose of travel, your clan's notable trait, your clan status, your adventure hooks, and a quirk. Quirks are really, really cool. My favorite one is number 1, which is water from the sky. It always surprises you because dwarves live not outside, and that's really interesting. There's also the Gith. The Gith are in the book, and if you don't know about the Gith, well, you should read about them because they're cool. But if you don't, then who cares? But they were the people that were enslaved by the Mind Flayers, and then broke free of their masters, which is why the Mind Flayers are like really tiny now, and they're pretty insignificant in terms of their power, which is cool. You can now play one. They're a playable race as of Mordenkainen's book of Tome of buddies, buddy dudes, buddy guys. Mordenkainen's little book. Tome of Bros. Mordenkainen's Tome of Dr. Phil's Bros. There's also stuff for Halflings and Gnomes. Halfling flaws, these are really funny. You are very fidgety. Sitting still is a major challenge. And you never settle for one slice, we can have the whole cake. God, I love halflings. There's also gnome tables as well, which I think is really neat. I think that people should use them. I really always like the flaws and the personality traits. One of the gnome ones is you like to make little objects and creatures out of twigs or bits of metal and give them to friends. That's pretty fun. So that's the first bit of the book, which is all the player races and stuff. What do I think? I think it's cool. I think it's great. I think it's definitely worth how much this book costs. There's a lot to read about, and there's a lot that you can gain from dungeon masters and players. That's pretty cool, and I think that's really interesting. If I'm give it any cons, I'd say, some people might not find this interesting. It's a lot to read, and it doesn't necessarily have to pertain to really anything. D&D is about, you can just roll up a character and play. Unless you really want to get more in detail to your character, I like the tables. The tables are interesting. I'm glad they added those. If this book would have just been lore after every page, that would have been boring and useless for everybody except for dungeon masters. But it's not like DMs need to be going around, telling everybody the lore of the world of gnomes and all that stuff. So, it's cool. I think I like it. I think it's great. I think it's adequate. If you want to read more about D&D, this is definitely going to give you it, and it's going to give you more options for your campaigns. Now we're going to get into the part of this book that I think is really interesting. All the monsters. There's a lot, and they are very high challenge rating, and they are very scary. A lot of these monsters come from previous editions, so we're going to point that out right there. There are new monsters, I think. I don't know all the additions to D&D, but the first thing, if we're going to make this an adequate review, is a lot of the monsters are from previous editions. For example, the very first one is an Alep. Aleps were in 3.5. I remember them. And it's just converted over the 5th edition, which is cool. I think that's great. One thing I really have to point out in terms of review for this book is the artwork is amazing. I want to give it a 10 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. The artwork is fantastic. In previous books, the artwork has been kind of crappy. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide artwork is nasty and looks terrible. But the artwork for some of the pre-written adventures is really good sometimes. But this book, the artwork is just amazing. I haven't found a picture of it that looks gross. So, really great job on that. There are a lot of really cool monsters. There's some really interesting ones in here. I'm not going to go over all of them because I don't want to give everything away that's in the book. There's a lot of creepy stuff. For example, this guy right here. This is a bone claw. I don't know if this was in previous editions, but he's hella scary. And a lot of the monsters in this book are hella scary. I'm really happy there are a lot more undead. I feel like there weren't a whole lot of undead in Volo's guide. There were a few. There's not a whole lot of undead in the normal book, but this book, if you're running a game and your big bad guy's a lich, oh man, lots of options for you in this book. And I think that's really great. Also, demons, devils, we know all that. This book is basically almost, I'd say 40 to 50% demons and devils. So, yeah. Chokers are in the book. There's this one thing called the Cadaver Collector. They're pretty cool. There's lots and lots and lots of monsters. One that I think is really neat, I think is very unique and very interesting. They're called Deathlocks. I still don't know if this was in a previous edition or not, But I think they're cool that they're in 5th edition, and they're basically warlocks that became undead. They're like Oathbreaker paladins, but they're like Oathbreaker warlocks. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's really cool. Baphomet is in the book as well. Okay, so that's another thing. I was like, okay, this is in the book, but it's not like it's new content. All of the demon lords were actually in Out of the Abyss. All of their stat blocks are in the back, like Grotz, Baphomet, Demogorgon, Juoblex, Frazer Blue, all of them are in here. So they kind of just took them and ported them over, literally word for word. All the madness is there, the regional effects of their stuff. That's neat. I think that's great. They did basically recycle it, which I mean, that's a good, like, that's a lot of pages in here that are just like, well, that's just from a previous book. There's these new demons of Tiamat called Abishais, and they are pretty cool. They're like dragon-like demon devils, and I think that's pretty awesome. They're devils. Devils. There are new constructs as well, and a lot of, God, look at this fucking creepy ass bitch. Like, they went all creepy with this book, and I love it. One of my favorite parts about this book is that they put the stat blocks for most of the devils. So a lot of the archdevil stat blocks are in here, and that's really cool. There are only a few, however. They're not like a billion. So there's Bale. Bale is awesome. He looks really cool. He's got some cool abilities that he can do if you want to have him as like a BVG. So a big theme with this book is that it's higher level monsters, above a CR, very high challenge rating monsters. You'll flip through and you're like, holy crap, these are really strong. A lot of Volo's Guide had a lot of very low level monsters. There is Garyon. His name's Gary. This guy's a snake. His name is Gary. He's going to kill you with his challenge rating of 22. And his infernal glare. Gary looks at you and you become frightened as his legendary action. You'll be scared of Gary. Hutijin? Hutijin. I think this is really interesting. This is from the very first edition of D&D. We all know what the cover looks like. It's got this dude on it, the little devil guy. And they like updated him and put him in 5th edition. And they show his origins of where he came. Fucking dropping the book everywhere. Where he came from and all that stuff. So I think that's really neat. I think that's cool. If you want something classic in your game, there is Titnus, Titvilis. He's cool. He's got some interesting abilities that he can do. A lot of these monsters have very unique abilities that a lot of other monsters don't have, and I think that makes it really interesting. You get a lot out of this book. There's a lot of lore for each being and monster, like the devils and demons. And so you get to learn about them, but you also get to have the stat block, which I think is really, really interesting. It's probably my favorite part about this book. And they all have like layers too. Most of them do, I think. That past guy didn't, but I know Zerial's got like a layer, which is interesting. So overall, there are 6 archdevils that you can use if you want those to be in your campaigns. If we want to compare them to the demon lords, I think there are 8. There are 8 demon lords, but the demon lords were in Out of the Abyss. And then they made the archdevils, and they made 6. So, but they made a bunch of new monsters, which is cool. Like Drow. If you want higher level Drow in your campaign to kind of challenge your party a little bit more, I think that's cool, I guess. I'm more into the lore of Drow. I think it's more interesting that players can have more options for them or have the ability to learn more about who the Drow are. Drow in campaigns, I think, are really interesting, and I feel like they're very underplayed and not played correctly a whole lot of times. Lots of, like, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Drow stat blocks. One of them it's pretty cool. It's called the Drow Shadowblade. There's also a Drow Matron Mother who's a CR of 20. There's like a Leviathan and a Phoenix stat block. It's huge. It's gargantuan. It's amazing. It's pretty awesome. There's new elementals. There's okay. All right. So we've gone over the demon lords. Okay. We've gone over the devils. We've gone over new creatures, crazy ass stuff in this book. New elves, new drow. But there are also space hippos with guns. Okay? They have monocles. They're actually from space, and they have guns. And they travel in packs. There's never just one hippo. There's many. There's more demons. Hey, the things from 3.5. Remember the gray render? They're in the game now. And they're pretty boring. They're just big dudes that just attack all the time. And it's really it. They're really simple, but they're a nice challenge for your party if you want to throw something huge at them that they can fight. They have little quirks too. Like they howl when it rains. What does a gray render howl sound like? That's definitely what it sounds like. Nightmare fuel. Nightmare fuel. My creepy uncle. More nightmare fuel. Actually, these things are fucking badass. There's also new oozes. I love oozes, personally. I don't want to talk about them too much because they're awesome, but just check out this picture right here. They can like clone into other people, and I think that's really cool. I don't know why these are in here. This is like a full like 2-page like thing from Tomb of Annihilation. There's a few of these in here. There's one from Out of the Abyss 2. It's Zugget Moy across the side. It kind of feels like a magazine sometimes. I'm like, okay, why is this page in here? Don't really know, but the artwork is very cool. So another thing I do want to talk about, because I heard a bunch of other people talk about this, is some people think that you should not get this book because it goes really into the D&D lore. Now, sure, I think what this book is, at least for me, and how I'm going to use it, is a new, unique way to approach certain monsters and use them against my players. After a while, when you keep playing, 5th edition for so long, everybody starts to know what all the monsters are, and you're trying to come up with new ways to surprise them. And what's cool about this book is you get a whole bunch of pages to surprise them. And that's really cool. I think that's really interesting. There's lots of really cool monsters in here, and I think that's probably the highlight of this book, is that the monsters in here are insane and they're very cool. More Yugoloths. Oh my gosh, this one's awesome. Okay, it's called Vampiric Mist, and it's a vampire that never made it back to its coffin, and so it stayed mist and it just hunts people down. That's so cool. That's a great concept. That's really awesome. And at the back of the book, we get one swole boy. So that's Mordenkainen's a little run through of the book, because I'm so sorry I didn't read through all of it. They also have the creature environments in the back. You can sort them by environments and the challenge ratings. This book currently costs $50, which is pretty cool. I think that's probably the special edition. What is this one? It's $50. You probably get it on Amazon for cheaper. You get it in your game store for maybe a little cheaper. I think it's worth it. If you want to add a shit ton more stuff into your game, into your D&D game, this is basically like a Monster Manual Volume 2. However, it's not like a little pamphlet with like a bunch of little like themed monsters. Like you're just gonna get dragons. You're just gonna get demons and devils. You're getting a lot of stuff in here. It surprised me when I opened the book, and that was one of the biggest things that I really liked about this book. When I went to Volos, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. There's lizard folk, okay. These were like kind of in the previous editions, and we could kind of make this up. It's just more like, okay, now it's official, so cool, we can use it in certain things. And I like that. I think that's cool. There's monsters in there I think are really interesting too. And I had a lot of fun when I first got Volos because I could throw monsters at my players. They had no idea what they were. And the same thing goes for this book. I think there's a lot you can get out of this. The fact that it's not just monsters and it's not just new playable races and things like that makes this book very valuable and very, very cool. I don't know if I want to rate it because it's kind of hard to rate a Dungeons and Dragons book, but I like it. I'd say I highly recommend it. But I'd only recommend it to dungeon masters that are looking to add more flavor and more really neat things into their campaign. If you're like new to D&D, you don't need to pick this up. It's not that important. But it's a good book. It's written well, and it's got a lot of new interesting stat stuff. That is the end of the video.